Welcome to Live Daf, your online Daf Yomi Shir.
Shalom Aleichem, welcome back to today's Daf, which is Eruvin Ein Gimel. We're in Ein Beis, Amud Beis, all the way on the bottom line. Mayim Mokim Dira. The Gemara told us that if a person has a place of residence in a Chatzar, a Mokim Dira, he needs to participate in the Eruv. Now, what is considered to be a Mokim Dira? Suppose a person has two homes. A home in one Chatzar where he eats, that's the place where he conducts his meals. Another home in a different Chatzar where he sleeps, his place of lodging. So what is considered to be his primary place of residence, which will necessitate his participation in the Erev Chatzeres of that Chatzar? One can only live in one place. So what is considered to be his true place of residence? We have machlekes. My mokem dira. Rav Amar mokem pita. The place of his bread. Pita means his bread, so where he eats. Ushmuel Amar mokem lina. The location where he sleeps. His place of lodging. So a person needs basically two things to keep him going physically. His food and his sleep. Rav says the mokem of the achila is the ikar mokem dira. And Shmuel maintains it is the place of lodging. Says the Gemara, Meisvei v'akashma Brisa on Rav. The Brisa says Haroyim, shepherds, v'akayotzin, those who go to watch the figs while they're drying, v'aburgonen, those who stay out in these huts to watch the city, v'shemir peres, the fruit watchmen. So they stay all the way out there and they do their job. And then they come back home to the city to eat. So the question is regarding establishing their tchum. What is considered to be a true place of residence with regards to measuring the 2,000 am allowance? From where? Where do we measure it from? Is it from their home back in the city, or from their current location where they spend their days? They go to watch the fruit. Says the Brisa, it depends. When they regularly go back into the city to go to sleep, then we give them the same status as the residents of the city. What happens there? The whole city is just like 4 amas, and then 2,000 amma beyond the city, because these watchmen come back home to sleep. So that becomes their mokim dira. However, if they sleep out in the field, and that is their place of lodging, in that case, they're not regarded as the residents of the city. Rather, we measure the 2,000 allowance from their location out of the city, where they stand guard on the city or on the fruit. So what is this akasha to Rav? Because Rav maintains that the determinant factor when it comes to establishing the mokem dira is not where you sleep, rather where you eat. This Brisa seems to indicate otherwise. It is their mokem melina, their place of lodging, which determines their location. Now the Gemara is comparing Erev Chatzeres to Erev Tchumen. It's based on the same concept. Where is the person's place of residence? So just as we see in this Brisa, when it comes to establishing the Tchum, the mokem of sleeping is their ikar mokem dira. Likewise, when it comes to Erev Chatzeres, that should be the defining criterion. Says the Gemara there, it's Hasam Anan Sadi. In that case of the watchman, we're sure, Anan Sadi, we can testify. Di imam tilhu rifta hasam tfei nichlu. If there should be a practical way to have their bread brought over there, to have it delivered, to have their meals delivered to their location out in the field, certainly that would be preferred for them. Meaning, even though they happen to go home to eat, that's just circumstantial. So, in reality, their true mokem dira, their preferred mokem dira, is really out in the field. That's where they sleep, and therefore it's not a kasha on Rav. Again, the kasha was, we see in this brisa, that if they sleep out in the field, that becomes their mokem dira, and that 2,000 amma allowance is measured from there, despite the fact that they eat in the city. This seems to be inconsistent with Rav, who tells us that the location where a person eats is considered to be his makom dir. Says the Gemara, although practically speaking they have to eat in the city, it's just out of practical considerations. But ideally, they really want to have their meals out in the field where they sleep. So it doesn't really relate to the discussion between Rav and Shmuel who are speaking about stama. Let's say there's no real preference, there's no explicit preference, no reason to prefer one over the other. He has a home here, a home there, here he eats, here he sleeps. The question is which one is considered to be the primary place of residence. But in a case where you spend your nights out in the field, then ideally you would like your meals out there, and it's just out of circumstance you have to come back in the city to eat. Even Rav would agree that the true makom dira is out there where you sleep. Says the Gemara, Amar Rav Yosef, I never heard this halacha of Rav, who said the makom pita is goyim. The location where one has his meals is considered to be his primary makom dira. Amar Abaye. So Abaye responded, we know that Rav Yosef forgot his learning, so he told him, At Amris Nilon, actually you taught us this halacha in the name of Rav, V'aha Amris Nilon, and it was in the following context. The Mishnah said, this was our Mishnah, but earlier in the Ayin Beis, Ha'achen shoy oichlin al shulchan avin. We have these brothers who eat on their father's table, meaning they're supported by their father. They get their food from their father's home. V'shein batein, but they sleep separately. They each had their own home in the chatzar. Tzrich eruv l'chol echad ve'echad. Each one needs to have an eruv. And we learned in the Mishnah, provided there are other people in the chatzar which necessitate the eruv, etc. So we have a situation where they, although they're eating all together in their father's home, so it's one makom of achila. Nevertheless, since they have separate sleeping quarters, then they're treated as separate residents. V'amrinan lach, and we told you, meaning us Talmidim, challenged you, asked you a kasha from this mission. Shema mina, can we conclude from this makom lina goyer that the location of lodging is what determines and establishes the place of residence? So this would be a kasha on Rav. V'amras lan Allah, and you told us that not necessarily. You explained to us Amar Vida Amar Rav. Right, so we wanted to know whether there's a raya from here that makom lina is goyer. And you responded, no. You responded, Amar Vida Amar Rav, the name of Rav himself, b'mekable pras shanu, that actually the case here was speaking where they weren't eating in their father's home. They were taking the food from their father's home and bringing it to their own private areas, the place where they sleep. So they're merely being supported by their father. So in this case, it won't be a kasha on Rav, because not only are they sleeping separately, but they have separate eating quarters as well. And therefore, we consider them to be separate residents, separate entities. So until now we discussed the case of a father and a son, and now the Brisa will enumerate several other cases. Tan Rabban, mi sheyesh lo chamesh noshim b'kablos prasim balein. If one has 5 wives who have 5 separate homes in the chatzar, and they are mekablos pras, meaning they're supported by their husband. V'chamisha avodim, or 5 servants, mekablos prasim rabbein, who are supported by their master. And again, they have separate sleeping quarters in the chatzar, but they are supported by their master who lives in the chatzar. Do we consider them as separate entities, or perhaps they are all bottled and connected to their provider, and therefore we only have one resident in this chatzar and no eruv is required? Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira mater b'noshim. When it comes to noshim, ishte kigufay, a wife and a husband are one and the same entity, and we say she's bottled to the husband, supported by the husband, she's bottled to the husband, and therefore there's no need to make an eruv. However, when it comes to servants, they don't have the same status, same connection, and although they're being supported by their master, who lives in this chatzar, they are all regarded as separate residents, and an eruv is required. So according to Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, noshim are connected, avodim are not. Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava, he says just the opposite. Mater ba'avodim. He says servants. The servant is totally subordinate to his master. He's meshubed. He's bound to his master, and therefore He's matir ba'avodim, so we have all these slaves, these servants living in the chatzar. They're considered to be connected to the master's household, and there's no need to make an eruv. However, when it comes to nashim who don't have that same shibud like a servant, he considers them like separate entities, separate residents, and an eruv is required. Amarav might Haimad Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava. What is the source of Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava who says that when it comes to servants, they're totally connected to their master, and says though they're actually living within the same home as their master? V'Daniel B'Tra Malka. The pasuk is describing Daniel, who was a servant of the king. B'Tra Malka. He's at the gate of the king. So Rashi says, B'Kol Makam Shehu, wherever he was, whether he was actually at the king's palace or home learning and eating, Chashav le B'Tra Malka. We regard him as being at the gate of the king, at the king's palace, meaning that he's inherently connected to the king. A servant is connected to the master, and therefore wherever he is, even if he actually has another home in the chatzar, he's considered to be living together with the master. Tosfos brings Rabbi Chananel, who actually adds one more dimension here. He says that the Gemara is also bringing a remez to for memory aid, to remember who said what. Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava means a shar in Aramaic, a gate. He was the one who said that a servant is connected to the master. V'Daniel B'Tra Malka. So B'Tra is shar, and Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava means a shar. He was the one who taught us this concept that a servant is connected to his master. Okay, so we have a husband and a wife. We have a servant to a master. Two shitas. Which one is connected? Which one is not? Continues the Gemara. Pshita. This is pretty clear. Bein Eitzel Aviv Kedam Maran. We have a son living with his father and being supported by his father. What is the halacha there? As we said earlier, certainly he's considered to be connected. No eruv is required, unless there are other people living in the chatzar, etc. Isha Eitzel Bala, Ve'eved Eitzel Rabbi Plukta. A husband with a wife living with her husband, an eved living with his master. We have this machlokes plukta, the Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava. What about Talmud Etzel Rabbi Mai? You have a student living with his rabbi in the chatzar. Under the same configuration, he's living in a different house, and he's being supported by the rabbi. What is the halacha there? Tashma, let's bring a right. The Rav Bei Rabbi Chia Amar. When Rav was being supported by his Rabbi Chia, he said, we don't need to make an eruv. Because we are supported by Rabbi Chia. Likewise, when Rabbi Chia was learning by Rabbi Amar, he said, we don't need to make an eruv. Because we're being supported by Rabbi. So it's very clear that a Talmud has the same status as a Rabbi. We know that the Gemara elsewhere tells us that a Talmud and a Rebbe are similar in concept to a son and a father. So there's that similar connection, and they're regarded as one and the same household and resident in this chatzar. Okay, so in conclusion, a son and a father, a Talmud and a Rebbe have this halacha regarding husband and wife, servant and master, where machlokes. Continues the Gemara, Ba Minei Abaye Mirab. So Abaye asked Rabbi the following question: Chamisha should go by Eruvin. There are 5 people who made an eruv in a chatzar. Now they'd like to connect next door to the next chatzar. So generally they would take the bread that they collected and bring it next door, and that would connect the 2 chatzeres. When they bring their eruv material next door, eruv echad lekulam, is it enough that one of them represents them all? So one of the eruv members will take even his bread and bring it next door, and he's going to represent his entire group. Is that okay? Or perhaps every member of that eruv group, of that chatzar, needs to personally bring bread across the wall, because everybody has to connect to the chatzar next door. We don't say that one could represent them all. Amarle eruv echad lekulam, it's enough that one represents them all. They don't all need to send their bread over. So Abaye asked him, I have a kasha from our Mishnah. But in this case of the brothers, who are residing with their father, supported by their father, and living in the same chutzner, in separate homes, we say, well, they're really like one entity, as if they made an eruv with each other, because the Mishnah clearly says if there's nobody else living in the chutzner, they don't need to make an eruv. So it's as though they're inherently connected, right? The chigavu domit, it's as though they made an eruv with each other. It's one unit, one entity. Uktani. Nevertheless, what does the Mishnah say? Tzrichen eruv k'echad ve'echad. Each one needs to send his eruv. And the presumption here was that they're trying to connect. We're describing a case where they're trying to connect to the chutzner next door. And the Mishnah tells us, although they're really one single unit, all these brothers, but when they want to connect next door, each one has to send his own eruv. So Rabbi told him, no, the Mishnah is not describing making an eruv with the chutzner next door. You know what we're speaking about? There were other residents living in the chutzner with them, and they're trying to allow carrying in this chutzner. That's what the Mishnah is speaking about. And in that case, they all need to contribute to the eruv. We're not speaking about taking a organized group, a connected group, a group who made an eruv and trying to connect them next door. Rather, we're trying to establish an eruv within this chutzner itself. So you're right, if there was nobody else here, they don't need to make an eruv. But there are other people in this chutzner, they need to make an eruv in this chutzner. Why? There are other people living with them. Since the other residents of this chutzner make things asr, because they certainly don't belong in this household. So the brothers as well will make things asr, meaning it's only with regards to themselves that we consider them to be one single entity. Let's remember the two aspects here to the brothers. They're one, but they're really separate. Right? They're supported by their father, but they have separate quarters, separate homes. So there's ways to look at them. So as far as themselves, let's say there would be nobody else here, then they could relate to themselves as one single entity because they're supported by their father. They're members of the same household. But since there were other members of the chutzner living with them, so they don't relate to them, to the brothers, as one single entity. Rather, as far as they're concerned, they view them like separate residents, and therefore, all members of this chutzner, including the brothers, need to participate in the eruv chatzeros. Hachinam mistar. Indeed, it seems pretty clear. This is the basis of this halacha. The Mishnah clearly says, "A masai." When is this eruv required? When they bring their eruv to a different location, meaning there are other people in the chutzner here, and the eruv is required, and the eruv bread is actually not going to be placed in their father's home. Rather, it's going to be placed in a different home in the chutzner. However, if they were the host of the eruv, meaning the eruv is coming to their father's home, and they're connected to their father's home, it's as though they're all hosting the eruv. And we know that the person who hosts the eruv himself doesn't need to participate in the eruv. He's already living in that home. He doesn't need bread to bring him to that home. So if the eruv has arrived to their father's home, or alternatively, there's nobody else living in the chutzner to interfere with them, now we can treat them like one entity. Then they don't need to make an eruv. Shema mina. So it's pretty clear that this Mishnah is totally unconnected to our question. We had a question: if you have 5 people who made an eruv and they want to connect to the chutzner next door, how are they meant to do so? Does everybody have to contribute, or could one represent them all? And the answer on that is, yeah, one can represent them all. Our Mishnah was speaking about the allowance to carry in this mavi, in this chutzner itself. That's a totally different story. So yeah, if there are other people living there who interfere, who create this necessity to make the eruv, then everybody has to contribute evenly. All the members of a chutzner have to contribute bread for the eruv. But let's say after they do this eruv properly, they want to go ahead and connect to the chutzner next door. Certainly in that case, one portion of bread is enough on behalf of all. One can represent them all because they've already formed into one cohesive unit, and anybody in that unit can represent all the other members of that group. Continues the Gemara. We're going back to the question of Mokum Lina, Mokum Pita. What determines the true place of residence of a person? Boy Minei Rav Chia Barabin, Rav Sheshes. So yes, Rav Sheshes the following question. Bnei Beirav, the Bnei HaYeshiva, the Achli Nahama Babaga, who eat their bread, have their meals out in the valley. They have a host. In Europe they used to eat teg. Every day the Yeshiva Baruch used to go to a different balabas to have his meals. So they would go to somebody's home to have their meals. So that was their Mokim Achila, Mokim Pita. V'asu Baisi Beirav. However, they would come back to the Beis Medrash to sleep. So it would be food in one place, sleep in another location. The question is, what is their primary place of residence? Ki mashchinen lu tchuma. So when it comes to measuring the Tchum Shabbos, from where? Where do we measure from? Mi Beirav mashchinen lu. Do we measure it from the yeshiva where they sleep, or from their place of meals? So what determines the makom dira with regards to tchumen? Is it the lodging or dining? Amar Leisi told them ashchin beirav. Certainly we measure the tchum from the yeshiva, which is the place of lodging. So he asked them, let's stop, think for a second. When you place an erev tchumen out in the field, the end of the 2,000 amma mark, that becomes your makom shvisa. You're going to measure your 2,000 from there. Where are you sleeping? Not sleeping out in the open, you're sleeping back home. So why is it that we measure the tchum from your can of peanut butter sitting out in the open? If anything, that's just a makom pita. It's not a makom lina. And it comes back and sleeps at home. We measure the tchum from the makom of the area, from the location of the food. How is this consistent with what you just said? You just told me that when it comes to the Bnei Yeshiva, they eat over here and they sleep here. Where do we measure the tchum? From their lodging, from their yeshiva where they sleep. So why is it that when we come to measure the tchum, in a case where a person places the erev tchum out in the open, we measure it not from where he sleeps, rather from the food location? Our Malaysia told them, very simple. And this is similar to what we said earlier. There's the concept of anam sadi. We can testify. We know, we understand where he really wants to sleep. Where he really wants us to consider which location is really considered to be the malkaim of Dira, his true place of residence. See, they're like this. We have two cases, the Bnei Yeshiva and the person who places the erev tchumen. In both cases, we have indication of where he really wants to reside. Biyahi anan sadi. In that case of the erev tchumen, we're sure that it's actually the place of his food, which he considers his makom dira. Ubahadon anan sadi. And likewise, in this case, by us of the Bnei Yeshiva, we are certain that the yeshiva, for them, is considered to be their true makom dira. As he explains, in the case of the erev tchumen, where he places his food out in the field, we know with certainty that he would like to sleep out there. It's just practically not practical. Over there, we know if he would have a practical way of sleeping out in the field with his food, certainly he would want to sleep out there. Why? Because why is he placing the erev? He's placing the erev because tomorrow he knows he has to walk 2,000 amma. So certainly if he would have the ability to sleep there, he would prefer sleeping there. So that becomes really the makom shvisa. So the practically sleeping at home, that's not an indication that the makom of the food is not his true place of residence. He's precluded from sleeping there just out of practical considerations. Ubahada, likewise in the case of the Bnei Yeshiva, anan sadi, we can testify, we're sure, the ma'iselu rifta lebeirav, if they would have the bread delivered to the yeshiva, to have free delivery of their meals, certainly that would be the preferred method. Practically speaking, they have to go to the host to have their meals. It's not their cheres to go pick up food and bring it to the yeshiva, so eat it at their host's home. But really, their true focus and mind and heart is really out in the yeshiva. That's a true makom shvis, the true makom dira. And therefore, the tchum is measured from there. So, again, when it's arbitrary, when it's unknown, he has a place where he sleeps, a place where he eats, and it's unknown which one is really the preferred location, then we have a machlekes. Rab says it's the Makam Pita, Shmuel says Makam Lina, which is considered to be true Makam Dir. But when there's any indication of preference, such as in the case of Ben Yeshiva, where he truly wants to be in the yeshiva, or in the place where a person placed the Erev Tchumen, where he really would like to sleep out there. Or earlier we had those cases of the shepherds, etc., where they're sleeping out in the field, and preferably they would have their food out there if they can handle it, if they can arrange it. So in all those cases, since we have explicit reason, explicit indication that he prefers one place over the other, all would agree. Rav and Shmuel both agree. There's no machlekes that indeed that location is considered to be the true place of residence. Continues the Gemara. Boy Rami Bar Chama Rav Chisda. So Rami Bar Chama asked Rav Chisda the following question: Ava Benoi Harav Talmidai. If you have, let's say you have a mavi, and accessing this alleyway, you have two chatzeres. You have one chatzer where a father lives, and next door in the chatzer lives a son. So one is occupied by the av, one chatzer is occupied by the son. Harav Talmidai. You have a rav in one chatzer, talmidai in the next chatzer. Kirabim damu. Do we say that these are considered to be like a multitude, or yechidim damu, or are they considered to be merely like individuals? So actually, in this first case, we're speaking about the father and son, or the Rebbe and the Talmud living in the same chatzer. As Rashi explains, that the question pertains to the following scenario. You have a chatzer lifnim a chatzer. You have a chatzer inside the other chatzer. So the interior chatzer needs to walk through the outer chatzer to get to Shusarab. The halacha is if the inner chatzer is occupied by people who haven't made an eruv with each other, then the fact that they walk through the outer chutzner makes it usher upon them, as we're going to see later, Be'ez Hashem and Daf Ayin Hey. So let's say in the inside chutzner, the chutzner primi, there's a father and son living there. The way that we described it here, we have a father and son living in two homes, and the father supports the son, right? Similar to the discussion we had in the whole Gemara. So the question is, are they considered like Rabbim, like two separate residents? And therefore when they walk through the chutzner, the outer chutzner, their Drusas the fact that they have pedestrian rights there, usage rights, it makes it usher upon them? Or do we say Kichid and Damu, they're like one entity, since they don't need an Erev, and therefore they don't interfere by walking through the outer chutzner, they're not going to make things us. Tzrich an Erev, or ain't Tzrich an Erev? This is really one and the same question. Do they need to make an Erev with each other to carry in their chutzner, or perhaps not? Because the father supports the son, etc. One more question. Mavi shalehen nitar belechi v'koira? Here is the question of the mavi that has two chatzeres. One chatzer has a father, the other chatzer has a son, and they both access the mavi. Now, the halacha is that in order to allow carrying a mavi with a lechi yukara, the mavi needs to be a properly designed mavi. It needs to be a public access route, as the Rashba explains, because when a place is intended and designated for more private use, like a chutzner, that needs to be enclosed properly to provide tznius. However, a mavi, which is a publicly accessed alleyway, due to the volume of public traffic, it's not really designated for private use, and therefore you need less enclosure to consider it to be properly enclosed. Alechi v'kira are really just partial, incomplete enclosures, just a little side beam, a cross beam. So, in order for a mavi to make use of a lecha v'kira, to allow carrying within it through these incomplete mechitzas, it needs to be a publicly accessed mavi, accessed by at least two chatzeres. Now the question here is, the two chatzeres are occupied one by a father, one by a son. Now, halachically speaking, they're not really like two chatzeres, because since they don't need to make an eruv, they can transfer freely from one chatzer to the other. So although practically speaking, this mavi is accessed by two chatzeres, but halachically, it's not like there are two chatzeres here. They're like one and the same entity. So the question is, what do we focus on? When the Chacham established the guidelines that a mavi needs to have two chatzeres, is it enough to have the practical presence of two chatzeros, or you need halachic two chatzeros, which in this case you don't have. So that's the question here. Mavi shalehen, their mavi, to which their chatzeros access, nita b'lecha v'koira, can it be mutter using a lecha v'koira, or nita b'lecha v'koira, or perhaps not? Amar lei tanisua, so Rav Chizah responded, we have a brayso, which will tell us these halachas. Avu b'nai, harav talmidai, you have a father and a son, or a rebbe and a talmid, bizman she'ein imohen diyurin, when there are no other residents where they live, harein ki yechidim, they're considered like individuals. So this pertains to the first question. So when they walk through the outer chutzner, they don't make things asur, because they don't really need an eruv, they're considered to be like an individual. It's not like you have several residents here. Father and son are one and the same. Ben tzrichim la'arev, likewise they don't have to make an eruv with each other. And finally, u'mavi shalahen, nitar b'lecha v'koira, the mavi, which they walk through, can use a lecha v'koira because we focus on the practicality of things. The fact is we have two chatzeros. Funneling traffic into the mavi is considered to be a properly configured mavi, which can use a lecha v'koira. So in summary, we learned that if we have people that are mikabli pras, which means they're supported by somebody else. Now we're speaking that there are no other people in this chutzner other than these individuals that are supporting and being supported, or even if there are other people there and an eruv is required, but the eruv is being placed in their location, meaning they are the hosts of the eruv. So in the case of a father and son, the eruv is being placed in their father's home. So in any of these cases, the halacha is as follows. When it comes to a father and a son living in a chutzner, or a rav and a talmid, there's no need for them to make an eruv. They're considered to be one and the same entity. When it comes to husband and wife, a master and a servant, we have machlokes. According to one shita, the ish and the bala don't need an eruv, but the evan and the rabbi do. And the other shita holds just the opposite. We also learned that if a person has two designated locations, one where he eats, one where he sleeps, which one is considered to be the mokem dira? Rav says the mokem achila, Shmuel says the mokem of sleeping, but that's only provided that they're both equally designated locations. But if there's a preference to one location over the other, for instance the shepherds, etc., who sleep out in the field, and it's just out of circumstance they have to come back to eat their food in the city, or in the case of the yeshiva, likewise, who consider the place where they lodge out in the field or out in the beis medrash as their ikma kamdira when it comes to eruv chatzeres, when it comes to establishing their tchum, and likewise in the case where a person places an eruv tchumen out in the field, although it's merely his food, but that is presumed to be his ikma kamdira, his place of residence, and the tchum is measured from there according to all shittas. Continues the Mishnah. Chamesh chatzeres psuchos zuluzu. For you I have 5 chatzeres, all open to each other. They have a doorway, one to the other, as we see in the diagram here on the bottom right. Upsuchos lamavi, and they all have access to the mavi as well. So they're all lined up alongside the mavi. They all have access to the alleyway, and they have access to each other as well. Let's say they made an eruv throughout the chatzeres to allow carrying in the chatzeres, to allow carrying from one chatzer to the other, but they didn't really establish a sheet of mavos to allow carrying in the mavi. So what is halacha? Mutar mechatzeres, they're allowed to carry in the chatzeres, asurim b'mavi, but not in the mavi, because we're following the shita of Rabbi Meir. You may recall there was machlokes. Rabbanan hold that eruv and shita, one can work for the sake of the other, whereas Rabbi Meir holds you always need to do both. The halacha in the Mishnah seems to reflect Rabbi Meir's shita. Although they made an eruv chatzeres, they need to go and do a shita of mavos on top of that. Continues the Mishnah. If they made a shita of the mavoi, mutar kan v'kan. This allows them to carry in the alleyway, in the chatzeres as well, and this seems to be a stira to the first halacha. A shita suffices even for the chatzeres. What's going on? Are we following Rabbi Meir or are we not? The Gemara discusses. Continues the Mishnah. Eruv b'chatzeres nishtatu b'mavi. So the second part of the Mishnah speaks about a case where they did make an eruv chatzeres and a shituf, but somebody forgot. And one of the chatzar members didn't participate in the eruv chatzeres. Mutar kan v'kan. They're allowed to carry in the chatzeres and in the mavi as well. Now we really had a difficulty, because if we're following Rabbi Meir, So once again, why? Why would it be mutter to carry, even though somebody forgot to be mishtatif, to make an Erev Chatzeres? So although they made a sheet of voice properly, but the Erev Chatzeres was not proper because somebody forgot. The Gemara will discuss this. Concludes the Mishnah in the third part, Mi b'nei mavi v'lo nishtatif. So we have an Erev Chatzeres, we have a sheet of voice, but one of the mavi members forgot to be mishtatif, meaning one of the Chatzeres didn't contribute to the sheet of voice. Mutar mechatzeres, asur b'mavi. So certainly the Chatzeres are mutar, but not the mavi. In line with the Shittas Rameir, who requires an Erev Chatzeres and a sheet of voice. So the sefer of the Mishnah seems to be reflecting Rameir again. Concludes the Mishnah, why is it so important to make a sheet of voice? You know why? Sha'mavi l'chatzeres, because the function of the mavi versus the courtyards, it services the chatzeres kechatzer lebatam, just as the chatzer services the homes. Let's take a look at Rashi inside, 4 lines from the top. Sha'mavi l'chatzeres kechatzer lebatam, explains Rashi, Kishem she'asal lahoitzim min habatam l'chatzer b'lei erev, just as you can't transfer from the homes to the chatzer without an erev, because the home is personal space. The chatzer is a publicly used area. It's as though you're taking from one type of rishis to the other, which can lead a person to carry from shizech to shirabim. So an erev is required, which joins everybody together, and it makes it all one makim, one resident. It's not like from my rishis to yours. It's all one rishis. So erev addresses that. Likewise, when it comes to the chatzer, from the chatzer to the mavi, you have the same issue. Kach atzal lahoitzim min hachatzer l'mavi b'lei shituf. You can't transfer from the chatzer to the mavi without a shituf. V'loi tema, the chiddush here is, don't think to differentiate. V'loi tema l'oi damu, that they're dissimilar. The bayis v'chatzer, when it comes to a house and a chatzer, yeah, there's a need to make an erev. There's zurishis hayachid. The house is designated for personal use, v'zurishis rab, and the chatzer is a public area. So that's why you require an erev. But perhaps when it comes to chatzer and mavi, they're too similar to each other to create any concern. Aval chatzer and mavi shnei rishis rabim. Both the chatzer and mavi are publicly used areas. So perhaps there's no concern transferring from one to the other. Without a shidduch, comes the Mishnah tells us no. The mavi is a more publicly accessed area than the chatzer, which is designated specifically for these residents, and therefore transferring from the chatzer to the mavi resembles transferring from one shus to the other, and therefore you need to make a sheet of mavois to connect everybody together, and now it becomes one joint usage area. Continues the Gemara. So the Mishnah began by telling us they need to make a Erev Chatzeres, and on top of that a sheet of mavois. Mani Rabbi Meir. Apparently we're following Rabbi Meir's shita. The Amar being an Eruv, being a shituf. You need to make an Erev and a shituf. Okay. Let's proceed to the next statement in the Mishnah, which says, if they made a sheet of mavois, mutar and kan v'kan, they're allowed to carry in the mavi and the chatzeres. Ason Rabbanon, this seems to be following Rabbanon, the Amri Bechad Asagi, who maintain that one is enough, as long as you make a shituf, which is considered to be, according to the Rabbanon, an all-encompassing union. There's no more need to connect the chatzeres, to make an Erev Chatzeres at all. So the Mishnah, which says that shituf mavois creates that universal allowance, appears to be following the Rabbanon. Says Mahalai Kasha. The answer is very simple. The Mishnah is simply saying that if, in addition to the Erev Chatzer, they also made a shituf mavois, then you're okay. In accordance with Rabbi Meir, who requires both. Okay. Ema Sefer. Let's proceed to section 2 of the Mishnah, which says, Iru b'chatzeros v'nishtat v'b'mavim. If they made Erev Chatzeres and a shituf mavois. And what happened? V'shachach echad mibnei chatzer b'lei yirev. And a chatzer member forgot to participate. Mutarim mekan v'kan. So although the Erev Chatzeres wasn't properly established, that's okay. No harm was done. They can carry in the Chatzeres, they can carry in the mavi. Now let's analyze this. Hey Chidami, what are we speaking here? Either loy batal, if this fellow who forgot to participate in the Erev didn't do bittul, am I return? Why are they allowed to transfer in the Chatzeres? It wasn't a properly established Erev. El pshita the batal. Apparently he was mavatal. Okay. That explains the halacha. So although you need to make an Erev and a shituf, and somebody forgot to make an Erev, but he did bittul, which serves as an alternative to the Erev. If that's the case, Ema Sefer. Let's proceed to the third clause in the Mishnah, which says, Shachach echad m'nei bavi v'lo nishtatfu. So they made an Erev and a shituf, and one of the members of the mavui meaning in this case it's a full chatzar, didn't take part in the shituf mavois. What is the halacha? Mutar b'chatzeres v'asur b'mavi. So certainly they can carry throughout the chatzeres because the eruv is valid, but the shituf is invalid and therefore they can't carry the mavi. The batal. Now, if you propose that we're speaking that the person who forgot did bittul, so let's assume in this case the chatzar that forgot to do shituf said no problem, I'm going to be mevatel. Now, if there was bittul here, amayasurin. The batal amayasurin. Why would they be asked to carry in the mavi? Amayasurin b'mavi. Says the perhaps you'll say, because Sabra of Meir. Rabbi Meir holds, Rabbi Meir, who's the author of this Mishnah, holds, ain't bittul shus b'mavi. You can't do bittul shus in a mavi. Bittul was a provision provided by the Chacham as an alternative to Eruvin in the Chatzar where you need to carry it. You ikim mokim of carrying mokim shimush. But in a mavi, keep out of the mavi. The Chacham did not apply that leniency there. Perhaps you'll say that. And that's why, in this case, although they want to make bittul, but it doesn't work. And therefore, they can't carry the mavi. Is that the pshat in the Mishnah? But that's not so. You can make bittul in a mavi. For a tanya, we learned in a brayso. This is regarding that stuki who lived together in a mavi with Gamliel's family. And Rabbi Gamliel told his sons, you can carry in the mavi shari bittul lechem reshusei. Divrei Rab Meir. So Rab Meir's narrative of the story was that Rabbi Gamliel told his sons, you can carry in the mavi because the stuki was mevatel. Bittul helps in a mavi. Elab shittul lebatel. Apparently, if there's any problem here because of the lack of shituf, apparently we're speaking that they didn't do bittul. Umad desefet lebatel. Now, let's assume if the last case of the Mishnah is speaking where there was no bittul, reishanami lebatel. The previous case as well, which was where one of the chatzar members forgot to do eruv. The Mishnah tells us that you can still carry throughout the chatzar. Apparently that also speaking about there was no bittul. Let's assume the Mishnah is consistent. And there was no bittul in this Mishnah at all. How can they carry in the chatzar? So although they did a shituf mavois, but that doesn't cover for the eruv chatzeres. Unless that's reflecting shittas rabbanon, who say that one or the other is enough. Now, if that's the case, it's going to be really, really difficult. Because, let's remember, the first part of the Mishnah, which requires eruv and shituf, is whose shita? Rabbi Meir. The final clause of the Mishnah, which tells us that if they did eruv, but shituf wasn't successful, they can't carry in the mavi. And that indicates that we're following shittas Rabbi Meir as well. That requires eruv and shituf. So the reisha of Sefer Rabbi Meir. So both those are following Rabbi Meir. Mitzvah Rabbanan, the middle portion of Mishnah, which seems to indicate that as long as you did the shituf, you're okay. And even if one of the chatzar members forgot to be mishtatev in the eruv, you can still carry in the chatzar. Apparently that's the Rabbanan. That seems to be a bit difficult, that one Mishnah should be split in this way. Says the Gemara Kula Rabbi Meir. Indeed, the entire Mishnah is reflecting Rabbi Meir's shita, who requires eruv and shituf. So what's left to be explained is the Mishnah, is the middle case in the Mishnah, where one of the chatzar members didn't take part in the eruv, and you can still carry. Why? Says the Gemara, I'll tell you why. V'tama mai amar Rabbi Meir bin eruv ubin shituf. Why indeed did Rabbi Meir require originally eruv and shituf? Why can't one work for the other? Why can't we say, well, for instance, if you did shituf, you mean you meant to include everybody, to encompass everybody in this union, and that includes everybody, all the chatzerim, all the members of the chatzeris. So why is eruv required? So that the kids won't forget about the concept of eruv. If you allow only shituf to take care of the whole concern here, they'll notice the shituf sitting out in the chatzar, but they'll say, well, how are we carrying in the chatzar? There's no eruv. They don't realize that one can be applied for the other. So we want to keep them mindful of the concept. And that's why eruv is required, even when shituf was done. It says in this case it's different. V'hacha kiva deruba irbu. Since most of the members of the chatzar made an eruv, right? There was only one person who forgot. Lo mishtach. The eruv, the concept won't be forgotten. They'll say, look, everybody's involved, they're collecting food, so if one person forgot, not so terrible. And that's why, in this case, uniquely in this case, Rabbi Meir says, it's okay, even if one forgot to participate in the eruv. Because we have the shituf. We have pretty much an eruv. 99% of the eruv is here. Therefore, the mavi is mutter betiltel, and the chatzeres are mutter betiltel. So technically, according to our mayor, in this case, the shittim of voice will really cover for the eruv, because the eruv wasn't properly established. So the partnership created by that shittim includes the chatzeres as well. Generally, he doesn't suffice with that. He requires an eruv of the chatzeres for the kids. But the fact that most people took part in the eruv, most people contributed in the eruv chatzeres, that's enough to address that concern, and therefore the Mishnah tells us that you can carry throughout the entire eruv. So in summary, there are three parts of this Mishnah, which apparently is being authored by Rabbi Meir. The first part says you need to make an eruv and a shituf to allow carrying the chatzar and the mavi. Part 2 of the Mishnah says if one of the chatzar members forgot to take part, they can still carry. And the Gemara tells us because most people took part, that's okay. The final halacha of the Mishnah says if they made an eruv and a shituf, but one of the chatzeres forgot to participate in the mavi, you're allowed to carry throughout the chatzeres, but not the mavi, because we're following Rabbi Meir, who requires an eruv and a shituf as well. In this case, where entire chatzer neglected to participate, that's not considered to be an adequate arrangement, and therefore it's us to carry in the mavi. Continues the Gemara. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Rav loitani psuchas lezu. You meant to know that Rav's girsa, now Mishnah, getting back to the mavi, which was lined with 5 chatzeros who accessed that mavi. According to our girsa in the Mishnah, not only were they opened and would access open to and access the mavi, they were actually opened up to each other as well. There was a doorway going from one chatzah to the other. So they had access to each other, aside from access to the mavi. However, says Rabbi Yehuda, you meant to know that Rav had a different version of our Mishnah. Loitani psuchas lezu. According to his version, the Mishnah did not describe them as being open to each other. They only had access to the mavi, not to each other. Rav Kahana, likewise Rav Kahana said, Rav loitani psuchas lezu. Rav did not describe them as being open to each other. Igadamri, some say Rav Kahana gufei. Rav Kahana himself had that girsa. Loitani psuchas lezu. His version of the Mishnah did not describe them as being open to each other. Amalei Abayla Rav Yosef. What's the big deal? My time with the loitani psuchas lezu. What's wrong with them being open to each other? Why is that so important that they should not have access to each other? So Rav Yosef told him, you know why? Because Rav holds kol shituf she'ei machnisoi umotzio derech psachem b'mavi lav shmei shituf. He holds that in order to establish a shittum of voice, what has to be done is as follows. The members of the various courtyards need to take their food, bring it out into the mavi, run through the mavi, and bring it into the final chatzar, the final destination. So why do they need to walk it out to the mavi and walk through the mavi and bring it to that final destination? In order to indicate, Rashi says, to show, to make a hecker. Look, we're trying to tie everybody together. So basically what they're doing is they're following the route of transfer. This is going to allow them to transfer from the chatzah to the mavi, and then from the mavi to the next chatzah. So by actually bringing their food in this manner, they're indicating that, look, this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to tie everybody together, the chatzah to the mavi to the chatzah. And this will be a true indication, it will be a visible demonstration that they're coming to bond together to the shittim of voice. Therefore, it must be speaking where the chatzeros are not open to each other, because in that case we're concerned perhaps, instead of taking the long route out into the mavi, back into the chatzer, they'll just transfer their food directly from one chatzer to the other till its final destination. That can't be done. So Rav was concerned. He says, if the chatzeros are open to each other, we don't allow a shituf to take place. The only time a shituf can be established is if they're exclusively open to the mavi and not to each other. Again, the words in the Gemara. Because Rav holds called shituf she'machnise, any shituf which is not brought into the mavi, umetzioi, and doesn't bring in, doesn't take out from the mavi into the chatzar, derech psachem b'mavi, through the doorways with the mavi, in and out of the mavi, lav shmei shituf, it's not considered to be a shituf. So that's why, in order to allow a shituf, like in our Mishnah, apparently the chatzeros were not open to each other. Because otherwise there's a concern they might actually avoid this procedure. Eisvei. So Abaya responded with a kasha from Brisa. you maintain that this is required. You have to actually carry the food into the mavi, back to the chatzar. We have a halacha which says as follows: Balabayis sheishuta l'shchenav. This is the Mishnah we learned earlier in the Ayin Aleph. If a balabayis had a commercial partnership with his neighbors, let's say a wine partnership with this chatzar, a wine partnership with the other chatzar, they no longer need to make a sheet of mavois. This substitutes because they're inherently connected through this partnership. Now, we're assuming that this wine was always here. He never transferred it through the chatzeres to the mavi. The whole procedure wasn't done. We see that's fine. Says the Gemara. How do you know? Hasam the apki v'ayle. Indeed, over there as well. He took the wine out of his chatzer. So although it was a business venture, but he knew he wants to use it for the shutfas. So he took it out of the chatzer, the afke, v'ayle, and brought it to the other chatzer, and went through this whole route through the mavi back home. Okay. So he asked him another kasha. Eisvei kesem mishatim b'mavi. So the Mishnah there speaks about a person who wants to make a mavi on behalf of all the bnei mavi. So he takes a barrel and he's makna to them, and it's his own food. He's not transferring it. He's not taking it through the whole route. So it still works. So it's more some nami there as well. The afki v'ayli brought it out, brought it in, and did this procedure. Maskeflo rabba b'chana. So he has the following kash. If that's the case, he can only pass b'saleh chanami d'lav shituf. A person is a nice fellow. He's makna to the other members some bread. Pas b'saleh. Are you going to say d'lav shituf because he didn't go through this whole procedure? Because the bread was always here and never left his chatzah? So you'll say, yeah, you're right. It's not going to work. If that's the case, Rabbi Yehuda told us the name of Rav. This is Rav himself. So we have a group sitting together, having a joint meal by a host. And Shabbos arrived. Hapas shal shulchan, hapas shal shulchanan, they can use this very bread sitting on the table as an eruv chatzeres, because they're experiencing this joint meal. They're sharing the bread together. This can serve as eruv chatzeres for all these members of the chatzir. Some say mishum shitu. It's going to serve as a shitu mavois. Actually, Rabbi said there's no machlekes between the two versions here. Whether it's eruv or shitu depends where they're sitting. If they're sitting and having their meal in a house, yeah, then that bread can serve as an eruv chatzeres, which is meant to be placed in a house. Whereas if they're sitting out in the chatzar, in the open air, that bread cannot serve as an eruv chatzeres. Rather, it's going to serve for a shitu mavois. Okay, but at any rate, we see that there's no need to transport the shitu mavois food through the chatzeres, through the mavi. There's no need. So why then does Rav describe our chatzeres as not having access to each other? Initially, we figured it was to ensure that they don't transfer the food directly from one chatzer to the other, to bring it to the mavi. But if that's not needed, then why did Rav describe the chatzeres as not being psuchois v'luzu? Says more, you know why? Because this mavi, which is going to use the lechev v'kira to allow carrying within it, needs to be accessed by two chatzeres, as we mentioned earlier. And Rav holds that we only consider them to be two chatzeres, two distinct entities, if they have no access to each other. There are no doorways between them which allow them to connect to an eruv with one another. But if there's a pesach between the chatzeres, which theoretically would allow them to connect through an eruv and bypass the mavi, then halachically speaking, we can't refer to those chatzeres as two distinct separate entities. In which case, this mavi is lacking the proper conditioning to allow it to use the lechev v'kira. It doesn't have two chatzeres open to it. And that's why Rav described these chatzeres as not having access to each other, in which case they can't do an eruv with one another. And only now do we consider them to be separate entities, and the mavi, which is being accessed by these two chatzeres, can use the lechev v'kira. Says more Elotama the Rav's reason is the kosavar, because he holds ein mavoi nita b'lechev v'kira. The only mavi which can use the lechev v'kira is if it's ad sheyu batim v'chatzeres p'such mosoichoi, the two chatzeres with two houses in each, which are accessing the mavi, then it's a proper mavi for lechev v'kira. That's why he insisted that these chatzeres don't be open to each other, in which case we consider them as two separate entities, and the mavi can use the lechev v'kira. Okay, time for a brief review of today's daf. If somebody is supported by somebody else and living with him in a different house but living in the same chatzar, like a father and a son, a Rebbe and a Talmud, they don't need to make an Eruv. Husband and wife, master and servant, Rav Machlekes. Rav says the makom where you eat is your Iker makom dira. Shmuel says the place of lodging, but that's if there's no special preference for one over the other. We concluded with a Mishnah that one needs to make an Eruv Chatzeres and Shita Mavois. Now, if they did them both, but one of the members of the Chatzar forgot, that's okay, because as long as most did, that's enough visibility for the children. We concluded with Rav, who described these Chatzeres as not having access to each other, so that they be considered two separate entities, and the Mavi now, which is accessed by two Chatzeres, can use a Lechem Ikar.